Upbeat, slightly mysterious intro music fades in and out. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Imagine a world where a whisper in the shadows could change the course of empires. A world where highly trained individuals operated in the deepest secrecy, their actions shaping the very fabric of medieval power. Sounds like a fantasy novel, right? But what if I told you these figures weren't just legend, but real, calculated forces in history? Today, we're diving deep into the clandestine world of medieval assassins, pulling back the veil on their secret lives and uncovering how their hidden influence reverberated through the grand halls of power. Get ready, because history is about to get a whole lot more thrilling. When we talk about medieval assassins, one group immediately springs to mind: the Hashashin, often misunderstood and sensationalized, but undeniably impactful. Their name itself, derived from Hashashiters, was largely a derogatory term used by their enemies, painting them as drug-fueled fanatics. But the reality was far more complex and, frankly, much more chillingly professional. Operating from formidable mountain fortresses like Alamut, deep within what is now Iran, these Nizari Ismailis weren't just killers. They were a highly organized religious and political sect whose primary weapon was strategic, targeted assassination. They weren't interested in mass casualties. They wanted precise, high-impact removal of key figures who threatened their community or ideology. Think about the sheer audacity and effectiveness of their strategy. In a world dominated by massive armies clashing on open battlefields, the Hashashin introduced a new kind of warfare, psychological and surgical. Their targets weren't random. They were powerful viziers, sultans, rival religious leaders, and crusader knights, individuals whose removal would send shockwaves across the political landscape, disrupt alliances, and sow widespread fear and instability among their enemies. They understood that sometimes, the death of one powerful man could achieve more than the slaughter of 1,000 soldiers. This wasn't just violence. It was a sophisticated form of political leverage, a means for a smaller, often persecuted group to challenge overwhelming military might. Their methods were a stark contrast to the brutal open warfare of the era. Forget clanking armor and charging cavalry. The Hashashin were masters of infiltration and disguise. They would spend months, even years, embedding themselves in the courts, armies, or even households of their intended victims. They learned languages, adopted local customs, and blended seamlessly into society, sometimes even rising to positions of trust within their target's inner circle. This wasn't about brute force, it was about patience, meticulous planning, and an almost artistic precision in their deadly craft. Imagine living for years, feigning loyalty, all while waiting for that single, opportune moment to strike. The psychological toll on their enemies, never knowing who to trust, was immense. Their training was rigorous and multifaceted. It wasn't just about wielding a dagger. Prospective members underwent intense ideological indoctrination, strengthening their resolve and commitment to the order's cause. They were taught a variety of skills, from languages and local customs to stealth, disguise, and unarmed combat. They mastered the art of observation, surveillance, and infiltration. And yes, they were incredibly skilled with daggers, their preferred weapon, often striking in broad daylight or crowded public places to maximize the psychological impact and spread terror. The message was clear: no one was safe, no matter how powerful, no matter how well guarded. One of the most famous examples of their strategic impact involves Conrad of Montferrat, a prominent leader of the Third Crusade. In 1192, Conrad, who was about to be crowned king of Jerusalem, was assassinated in Tyre. The immediate aftermath was chaos and finger-pointing, with Richard the Lionheart and Philip II of France being among the suspects. But historical accounts strongly suggest the Hashashin were behind it, likely hired by Saladin or other Muslim leaders who saw Conrad as a significant threat. This single act plunged the Crusader states into disarray, effectively derailing their ambitions and altering the course of the crusade. This wasn't just a murder, it was a geopolitical intervention. But the Hashashin weren't the only ones operating in the shadows. Throughout medieval Europe, various forms of targeted violence were employed, though perhaps less systematically organized than the Nizari Ismailis. In an age where political rivalries were fierce and justice often brutal, assassination could be a crude but effective tool for eliminating rivals, seizing power, or settling feuds. Think of the endless power struggles within royal families, between feudal lords, or even within the church. While not always attributed to a dedicated assassin order, the desire to remove an inconvenient individual was a constant undercurrent. The methods varied. Poison was a favored choice, subtle and often leaving little trace. A cup of wine, a poisoned meal, a tainted gift, the possibilities were endless and terrifyingly effective. Daggers remained popular, especially for close-quarters surprise attacks. Sometimes, it was an ambush by a few trusted retainers, made to look like a robbery or an act of banditry. The key was to ensure deniability for the orchestrator, making it difficult to trace back to the true source. This cloak and dagger world was a brutal chessboard where lives were expendable pieces. The long-term impact of these shadowy figures and their strategic assassinations was profound. They created an environment of paranoia and suspicion among the ruling elite. Kings, sultans, and nobles lived in constant fear, surrounded by guards, never fully trusting anyone. This paranoia could paralyze decision-making, force leaders to divert resources to security, and even lead to ill-advised political concessions just to avoid becoming a target. The very existence of such a threat could shape policy and alliances. For example, some historical texts suggest that certain Crusader commanders avoided direct confrontation with the Hashashin, opting instead for diplomacy or even paying tribute to ensure their own safety. Moreover, these assassinations often destabilized regions, creating power vacuums that led to further conflict or political upheaval. A well-placed dagger could trigger a succession crisis, ignite civil war, or even shatter empires. The medieval period was already volatile, and the added element of targeted killings made it even more unpredictable and dangerous, influencing everything from military campaigns to religious movements. Their legacy, particularly that of the Hashashin, continues to fascinate and horrify. They became mythical figures, their names synonymous with stealth and ruthlessness, influencing countless stories and legends. Their strategic genius in leveraging targeted violence as a political tool remains a chilling study in power dynamics. They remind us that history is not just made by grand armies and sweeping declarations, but often by quiet whispers and sudden, brutal acts carried out in the deepest shadows. So, the next time you think about medieval history, remember that beneath the surface of jousts and castles, there was a hidden world of intrigue, espionage, and calculated death. The medieval assassins, particularly groups like the Hashashin, were not just random killers. They were strategic players whose actions, though often veiled in secrecy, significantly influenced the course of empires and the fates of nations. They truly lived secret lives, but their shadows cast long, undeniable marks on history. What do you think about the medieval assassins? Do you find their methods fascinating or terrifying? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of history, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your fellow history buffs, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.